I still remember the exact moment Daniel asked me to go with him. It wasn't dramatic or planned. We were sitting in a small coffee shop near my apartment, the kind of place where no one rushes you out and the windows are always fogged up, even on clear days. He stirred his coffee slowly, then looked up and said, almost casually, I'm thinking of taking a short mountain trip this weekend, just to breathe. You want to come? At first, I laughed it off. A mountain trip sounded nice, but my life wasn't exactly simple at that time. I was in a relationship, on paper at least. Ryan and I had been together for almost 3 years. From the outside, we looked stable. Same apartment, same routine, same shared jokes. But inside, something had gone quiet. Conversations had turned into updates, affection into habit. We lived together, yet I often felt alone. Daniel knew all of this, at least parts of it. We had met a year earlier through mutual friends, and somehow he had become the person I talked to when I didn't know how to explain my feelings to anyone else. He was calm in a way that made people open up. He listened without interrupting, without trying to fix things. That made him dangerous in a way I didn't fully understand yet. I don't know, I said, staring at my cup. Ryan might not like it. Daniel shrugged gently. It's just a trip. Fresh air. No noise. You've been saying you're tired. He was right. I was tired, not physically, but emotionally. Tired of pretending everything was fine. Tired of pushing down thoughts that came up late at night when Ryan was asleep beside me, facing the other direction. Still, guilt settled in my chest immediately. Even considering the trip felt like a small betrayal. That night, I brought it up with Ryan. I tried to sound casual, like it didn't matter either way. He barely looked up from his phone. Yeah, sure, he said. Have fun. Just text me when you get there. There was no jealousy in his voice. No curiosity. That hurt more than I expected. The next 2 days passed slowly. I packed and unpacked my bag twice, unsure why I was so nervous. It wasn't like I was doing anything wrong, I told myself. Friends go on trips together all the time. Still, a quiet voice inside me kept asking why this felt different. Early Saturday morning, Daniel picked me up. The city faded behind us as the road narrowed and the buildings turned into trees. Music played softly, then stopped. We didn't rush to fill the silence. It felt natural, like we didn't need noise to justify our presence. As the mountains rose around us, something in my chest loosened. The air felt cleaner, sharper. Daniel smiled more out there, like the space gave him permission to breathe. We talked about small things at first, work, random memories, places we wanted to see someday. Nothing heavy, nothing risky. But even then, I noticed how easy it was to be myself around him. I didn't have to perform or explain. I didn't feel like I was asking for too much just by being present. That realization scared me. When we finally arrived at the cabin, the world felt very far away. No neighbors, no traffic, no constant buzzing of phones. Just trees, mountains, and a silence that felt honest. Daniel unlocked the door and stepped aside, letting me go in first. It was a small gesture, but it stayed with me. As I stood there, looking out of the mountains through the wide window, a thought crossed my mind when I tried hard to push away. This trip wasn't just about rest. It was about something I'd been avoiding for a long time. The truth about what I was missing and who I was becoming. I didn't know it yet, but agreeing to that trip had already changed something inside me. The first night in the mountains felt unreal, like we had stepped outside of time. After unloading the car, we made a simple dinner together, moving around the small kitchen without getting in each other's way. Outside, the sky slowly darkened, and the mountains turned into quiet shadows. There was no signal on our phones, and, for once, that didn't make me anxious. It felt like permission to disappear for a while. We ate at the small wooden table near the window. The cabin lights were soft, almost warm, and the silence between us didn't feel uncomfortable. It felt earned. Daniel talked about his childhood, about growing up in different places, and never really staying long enough to feel rooted. I found myself listening closely, not just to his words, but to the pauses between them. I think that's why I like places like this, he said, gesturing toward the dark outline of the trees outside. They don't ask anything from you. That line stayed with me. Back home, everything asked something from me. My job, my relationship, even my friends. Expectations were everywhere, pressing down quietly. Here, there was nothing to prove. Later, we stepped outside with mugs of hot tea. The air was cold and sharp, and the stars looked unreal, scattered across the sky in a way I'd never seen from the city. We stood side by side, looking up, not talking much. I felt small in a good way, like my problems didn't own the entire universe. That night, I lay awake longer than I expected. The cabin creaked softly, settling into the cold. My thoughts kept drifting back to Ryan. I wondered what he was doing, whether he missed me at all. Then I felt guilty for wondering that while lying a few feet away from someone else who made me feel strangely calm. I turned onto my side and stared into the dark, aware of a quiet tension growing inside me. The next morning, we woke early. Sunlight poured through the window, lighting up the room in soft gold. Daniel was already up, standing outside on the porch, breathing in the air like he'd been waiting for this moment his whole life. We ate breakfast quickly and decided to go for a hike before the trails got busy. The path was narrow and uneven, winding through tall trees and over small streams. As we walked, our conversation slowly deepened. Without the distractions of daily life, there was nowhere to hide. I told him things I hadn't said out loud before, about feeling invisible in my own relationship, about how I sometimes wondered if staying felt easier than being honest. Daniel listened quietly, not judging, not interrupting. When I finished, he nodded slowly. "That's a heavy thing to carry alone," he said. His words hit harder than I expected. I realized then how rarely anyone had acknowledged my feelings without trying to explain them away. We stopped walking for a moment, standing on a ridge overlooking the valley below. The view was wide and open, and something about it made honesty feel unavoidable. That I didn't say anything else, but I didn't need to. The silence between us held more meaning than words. For the first time in a long while, I felt seen, not as someone's partner, not as a role I was supposed to play, but as myself. That realization scared me. I knew I was crossing into dangerous territory, even if nothing physical had happened. Emotionally, I was leaning somewhere I shouldn't. I thought of Ryan again and felt a knot tighten in my stomach. I didn't want to hurt him. I didn't want to be the kind of person who betrays trust. Even quietly, on a hike back, Daniel walked a little ahead of me. I watched him move through the trees, steady and unhurried. I wondered if he felt the same shift I did, or if this was something happening only inside me. Part of me wanted to ask, to bring it into the open. Another part was afraid of what the answer might change. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains, I realized something important. This trip wasn't just about escape. It was showing me the gap between who I was pretending to be and who I actually was. And once you see a gap like that, you can't unsee it. That I didn't know what I would do with that truth yet. I only knew that when I eventually went back home, nothing would feel exactly the same again. The third day began quietly, almost cautiously, as if the mountains themselves were aware of the tension building between us. A thin layer of mist hung over the trees, and the air felt heavier than it had the day before. I woke up before Daniel this time and sat near the window, watching the world slowly come into focus. Somewhere deep inside, I knew this day would be different. When Daniel joined me, he seemed more reserved. Not distant, just thoughtful. We made breakfast with less conversation than usual, moving carefully around each other, as if we were both trying not to name something that had clearly taken shape. After eating, we decided to take one last long walk before packing up later in the afternoon. The trail we chose was steeper, more demanding. Our breathing grew heavier as we climbed, and the physical effort made silence easier to accept. At one point, Daniel stopped and waited for me to catch up. He handed me a bottle of water and smiled softly. "You okay?" he asked, and I nodded, but the truth was more complicated. I was okay physically, but emotionally I felt stretched thin. Being there with him felt right in a way that scared me. Not exciting or reckless, just right. And that was the problem. As we continued walking, Daniel spoke again, his voice calm but careful. "You've been quiet today." I hesitated. I could feel the words pressing against my chest, asking to be let out. "I've been thinking," I said finally, "about how easy it feels to talk to you, and how confusing that is for me." He slowed his pace, giving me his full attention without stopping completely. Confusing doesn't always mean wrong, he said gently. That sentence stayed with me, echoing in my mind. I knew he wasn't encouraging anything inappropriate. He wasn't crossing boundaries, but he was acknowledging what I felt. And that made it harder to ignore that we reached a clearing where the trees opened up to a wide view of the valley below. Wind moved through the grass, and clouds drifted slowly overhead. We stood there in silence for a long moment, both looking out but clearly thinking about something much closer. I don't want to be someone who hurts people, I said quietly. Saying it out loud felt like a confession. I care about Ryan, but I also can't pretend I don't feel different here. With you. Daniel took a step back, not away, but to give space to my words. I respect that, he said, and I don't want to be the reason you feel torn. There was relief in hearing that, mixed with sadness. It meant he felt it too, at least enough to be careful. That honesty drew me even closer emotionally, even as it forced me to confront the truth. I was already standing on the edge of something I hadn't planned. The rest of the hike passed quietly. When we returned to the cabin, we began packing without much conversation. Each folded shirt felt like a reminder that this moment was temporary. The mountains had given us clarity, but clarity comes with responsibility. The drive back felt longer than the drive there. The city slowly reappeared, and with it, the weight of real life. As Daniel dropped me off, we sat in the car for a moment before I got out. "Thank you for coming," he said, "and for being honest." I nodded. "Thank you for respecting me enough to listen." When I stepped out of the car and watched him drive away, I felt both lighter and heavier at the same time. Lighter because I had faced something real. Heavier because I knew I couldn't go back to pretending nothing had changed. That night, lying in my own bed, I realized the truth I had been avoiding. Infidelity isn't always about actions. Sometimes it begins in the quiet moments, in shared understanding, in feeling seen by someone new. And once you recognize that, you have to decide who you want to be next. That I didn't have the answer yet. But I knew the decision ahead would change everything. Coming back home felt stranger than I expected. The apartment looked the same. Same couch, same half-dead plant by the window, same quiet hum of the refrigerator, but I felt like a different person standing in it. Ryan was there, sitting on the couch with his laptop open. He smiled when he saw me, but it was the kind of smile that comes from habit, not from excitement. "How was the trip?" he asked. "Good," I said automatically. The word felt too small for everything that had happened. I set my bag down and tried to settle back into the rhythm of our shared space, but the silence felt heavier than before. The mountains had been quiet in a peaceful way. This quiet felt uncertain. Over the next few days, I noticed how distant I became without meaning to. Ryan talked about his work, his plans, the things he wanted to do next month. I listened, nodded, responded when needed, but my mind kept drifting, not to Daniel specifically, but to the feeling of honesty I had experienced. Once you've tasted that, it's hard to go back to pretending. Ryan noticed it too. One evening, as we were cleaning up after dinner, he turned to me and said, "You've been somewhere else lately. Did I do something wrong?" The question caught me off guard. It would have been easier if he was angry. Concern made this harder. I took a deep breath, knowing this moment had been coming since the trip ended. "No," I said carefully. "You didn't do anything wrong. I think I've been avoiding some things about myself." We sat down at the table, facing each other. The air felt tight, like it was waiting for the truth. I didn't mention Daniel. I didn't need to. This wasn't about another person. It was about the distance that had been growing between us long before the trip. "I've felt disconnected for a while," I continued. "I didn't know how to say it without hurting you. But pretending everything is fine feels worse now." Ryan was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was steady but tired. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "I was scared," I admitted. "Scared of change. Scared of being the bad guy." He nodded slowly. "I wish you'd trusted me with that. But I get it." There were no raised voices, no dramatic accusations. Just two people acknowledging that something important had faded. That calmness made it more painful in a way. It meant there was no villain, just reality that a few days later, we decided to separate. Not in anger, not with blame, but with honesty. We divided our things carefully, like people handling something fragile. When Ryan moved out, the apartment felt emptier than ever, but also strangely clear. During that time, Daniel and I barely spoke. A few short messages, nothing emotional. We both understood that space was necessary. I needed to sit with my choices, to understand where responsibility ended and healing began. Late one night, alone in the apartment, I thought about how easy it is to drift into emotional infidelity without realizing it. There are no secret meetings, no dramatic moments, just conversations, understanding, and a connection that grew quietly. That didn't make it harmless. It made it more important to take responsibility, that I didn't regret being honest. I regretted waiting so long to be. And in that quiet realization, I knew that whatever came next had to be built on truth, not avoidance. The mountains had given me clarity. Now real life was asking me to live with it. Time moved differently after everything settled. Days passed without the constant tension I had grown used to, and slowly, the quiet in my apartment began to feel less heavy. I spent a lot of time alone, learning how to sit with my thoughts instead of escaping them. For the first time in years, I wasn't trying to meet anyone's expectations. I was just trying to understand myself. I started therapy, something I had always said I would do someday. Those conversations helped me see my past choices more clearly, not with shame, but with honesty. I learned how easily fear can disguise itself as comfort, and how avoiding difficult truths can hurt people just as much as deliberate actions. Accepting that didn't make me feel worse. It made me feel grounded. Weeks later, Daniel reached out. The message was simple, careful, and respectful. He asked how I was doing, nothing more. I stared at my phone for a long time before replying. When I finally did, I told him the truth. I told him about the breakup, about the work I was doing on myself, and about how important it was to move slowly, without hiding anything that we met for coffee back in the city, far from the quiet safety of the mountains. Seeing him again felt different. There was no rush, no unspoken tension pulling us forward. Just two people choosing to be present and honest. We talked about what had happened, about the line we almost crossed, and the lessons it taught us both. I don't want anything built on someone else's pain, Daniel said. Neither do I replied, meaning it completely. That clarity changed everything. What grew between us afterward wasn't secret or rushed. It was intentional. We took our time, letting trust form naturally. There were no dramatic moments, no grand promises, just consistency, respect, and openness. One afternoon, months later, we took another trip to the mountains. This time, it felt different, lighter. We weren't running from anything or searching for answers. We were simply there, enjoying the quiet together. Standing on the same kind of ridge as before, I realized how much had changed. Not in the landscape, but in me, that I had learned that love shouldn't feel like hiding and connection shouldn't come at the cost of honesty. Infidelity, I understood now, isn't just about betrayal. It's about avoiding the truth until it forces its way out. Facing that truth early is an act of respect for yourself and for others. As we walked back down the trail, I felt grateful. Not because everything turned out perfectly, but because I had chosen integrity over fear. The mountains stood silent around us, unchanged, reminding me that clarity often comes when you're willing to be still and listen. And this time, I was ready to listen.